They say the most dangerous place isn't a dark alley at midnight, it's your own living room. Today, we are peeling back the layers of Detroit's hidden darkness. We aren't just talking about random street crime. We are tracking 10 individuals who wore the ultimate mask of sanity before revealing exactly who they really were. We are talking about a pastor who preached salvation while hiding a deadly secret, a mother who turned a basement freezer into a tomb, and a cousin who looked a grieving family in the eye and lied about where the body was buried. These are the cases that prove evil doesn't always look like a monster. Sometimes it looks like a neighbor, a friend, or family. Hi everyone, and welcome back to Murder Eyes. Before we dive into this nightmare, I want to try something different in the comments today. Instead of your location, tell me this. If you could have the answer to one unsolved mystery in history, just one, which case are you picking? I'll be reading the replies tonight. Now, let's get into it. Case number 1 takes us to the west side of Detroit, where shadows gathered in the one place Latimer Warren should have been safest, her own home. In December 2021, the 32-year-old mother vanished. She lived on Vaughn Street with her boyfriend, Rondell Waters. When days passed without a word from her, her family started asking questions. Now, ask yourself, if your partner went missing, how long would it take you to call the police? An hour? A day? For Rondell Waters, the answer was never. He didn't call the cops, he didn't call her family, he just kept living in the house. It was Latimer's grandmother, Gwen Parks, who felt that cold knot in her stomach. She confronted Waters, and he casually claimed he hadn't seen Latimer in 4 days. Yet, there he was, sitting on the couch, making zero effort to find her. While the initial police response was slow, a frustrating reality we see way too often, the community refused to wait. They organized their own search party. What they found in the backyard turned dread into absolute horror. Bags containing Latimer's clothing and patches of freshly disturbed earth. That is a detail that just makes your skin crawl. He was living right there, literally on top of the evidence. On January 17, 2022, police and cadaver dogs finally raided the house. In the basement, the dogs hit on a bag containing human remains. Upstairs, they found a second bag. Latima had been shot and dismembered. But the most chilling discovery wasn't just the body. It was who else was in that house. Officers found the couple's 3-month-old baby, alive and unharmed, living in that house of horrors with the man who had just butchered his mother. Waters was arrested on the spot. He didn't act like a grieving boyfriend. He acted like a man whose secrets had finally run out of room. He was charged with open murder and mutilation. Latima's story is a brutal reminder. Sometimes the monster isn't hiding under the bed. Sometimes he's the one sleeping in it. Case number 2 is a devastating story of escalating violence and a plot that reached out from behind bars. It centers on 35-year-old Billy Ray Cromer and his younger relative, Spencer Lewis Cromer III. The initial spiral began in October 2020. Billy attacked his then-pregnant girlfriend, Tiffany Joseph, at their Detroit home. Prosecutors detailed a horrifying scene. Billy choked her, struck her head and stomach, and forced her to swallow unidentified pills. The assault was so severe, Tiffany's unborn child did not survive. The Wayne County prosecutor later called it one of the worst domestic violence cases she had ever seen. Billy was arrested and charged with torture and causing a miscarriage. He was jailed, unable to post a high bond, but even behind prison walls, the violence didn't end. It just found a new instrument. Think about that. You are technically safe from him, the judge says. He's locked away. But the control, the need to finish the job, it's still operating. In the summer of 2022, Billy allegedly reached out from his cell and offered Spencer, his relative, money to carry out a contract killing. On the night of July 5th, a quiet holiday evening, the violence tragically returned to Roseman Avenue. Spencer allegedly entered the house and shot Tiffany. She was found dead inside the exact same location where her first brutal assault took place just 2 years earlier. Detectives quickly tied the murder back to the cell block. Both Cromer men were charged with first-degree premeditated murder. In court, Billy appeared utterly expressionless, while Spencer kept his eyes locked on the table. a chilling image that perfectly captured the reach of pure malice. This crime proved that sometimes the only thing more dangerous than a killer on the loose is a killer controlling the strings from inside. Case number 3 is that of Dante Rahman Smith. This is a chilling look at the terror that can erupt when severe mental illness goes unchecked. The tragedy centers on 19-year-old Dante Rahman Smith. On the morning of August 28, 2022, Smith was in the throes of a paranoid schizophrenic episode, genuinely believing people were trying to kill him and that the world was ending. Over 2.5 terrifying hours, he carried out a devastatingly random shooting spree across northwest Detroit that the prosecutor called devastatingly senseless. The sequence began at 4:45 a.m. when Smith approached and shot 28-year-old Chayne Lewis Lee, who died in the doorway of a church. Less than an hour later, an unidentified woman, listed as Jane Doe, was fatally wounded near Margaretta Street. The terror continued at 6:53 a.m. when 43-year-old single mother Laree Briscoe was killed while waiting for a bus. In these initial killings, Smith displayed a chilling pattern. He would shoot, walk away, and then return to fire more rounds. The rampage almost claimed a fourth life. At 7:08 a.m., Smith shot 76-year-old John Pollock as he walked his dog, Kingston. However, this time the community intervened. A neighbor opened fire to deter the attacker, and another quickly applied a tourniquet to Pollock's leg, ensuring both Pollock and his dog survived. The subsequent manhunt was massive. Police quickly connected all the shootings to the same firearm through shell casings. After police released surveillance images, someone close to Smith recognized him and provided the crucial tip that led to his surrender. Smith later pleaded guilty but mentally ill to second-degree murder and related counts. In February 2025, he was sentenced to 28 to 50 years in the Michigan Department of Corrections. This case remains a devastating example of how fragile public safety becomes when severe warning signs go unanswered. In court, some victims' family members expressed both sorrow for their loss and empathy for Smith, highlighting the systemic failures in mental health care that contributed to the tragedy. Case number 6 is that of Jalyn Tyler Pendergrass and Sharla Rashidita Pendergrass. This case begins with a lie so ordinary it barely whispers, until the truth is forced back into the light. It centers on the tragic disappearance of London Thomas. London was last seen around 4 a.m. on April 5, 2025, when she was dropped off at the Inkster home of her 23-year-old ex-boyfriend, Jalyn Tyler Pendergrass. Though their relationship had ended, evidence later showed she entered the house that night and never left alive. The Oakland County medical examiner would eventually rule her cause of death as asphyxia, confirming homicide. Hours after London disappeared, her family filed missing person reports. Meanwhile, prosecutors alleged Jalyn's mother, 49-year-old Sharla Rashidita Pendergrass, contacted a male friend asking him to help move a sealed plastic bin with unknown contents. According to investigators, that container was loaded into an SUV and remained parked in a Southfield driveway for nearly 2 weeks. On April 26th, police, acting on a tip, found the SUV and inside it the sealed bin containing London's body. The investigation that followed was massive, involving local and federal agencies. The turning point arrived when the friend disclosed Sharla's request to relocate the mysterious bin. Detectives retraced every movement, linking the mother and son to the calculated concealment effort. Both defendants were arrested and charged with second-degree murder and conspiracy to tamper with evidence. During their arraignment, Jalyn was silent and his bond was denied due to the severity of the crime. Sharla's bond was set at an extraordinarily high $5 million cash. As prosecutors argued, she had engaged in an extended campaign to lie to police. London's family expressed relief that charges had finally been filed, stating they knew the pair were responsible. This case highlights how deep the deception can run, even involving family, when a life is taken. Case number 7 is that of Albert Weathers. Before the city fully awakened, a grim discovery on a cold Detroit street revealed a truth too heavy to ignore. The case centered on 36-year-old Kelly Stoff, a transgender woman whose body was found around 6 a.m. on December 7, 2018. She had a single gunshot wound, Within hours, investigators linked the evidence to 46-year-old Albert Weathers, a former pastor and an off-duty employee of the Great Lakes Water Authority. Prosecutors later noted that stuff had been left discarded like trash, a detail that immediately fueled public outrage. Weathers contacted police roughly an hour after the killing, claiming he had shot someone in self-defense during an attempted robbery. He alleged staff approached him with a sharp object after he dropped off his daughter at school. However, testimony quickly painted a more complicated portrait. A trans woman who worked in the area testified that Weathers had been a customer of several sex workers and often behaved in an aggressive, intimidating manner. These conflicting accounts became central to the prosecution's theory of what truly happened in the final minutes of Stuff's life. 3 days after the killing, Weathers was charged with open murder and felony firearm. The case was assigned to a special prosecutor team focused on crimes against LGBTQ victims. Over the next 4 years, investigators reviewed phone data and tracked the inconsistencies in Weathers' statements. In July 2023, Weathers ultimately pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and felony firearm. During sentencing, the assistant prosecutor stated she did not believe Weathers fully grasped the harm he had caused. He received a maximum sentence of up to 16 years, with the prosecutor emphasizing that the transgender community would be protected in Wayne County. Weathers' conviction delivered a measure of closure, but his actions served as a devastating reminder of the vulnerability faced by marginalized individuals. Case number 8 is that of Demetris Nelson. This case highlights the frightening risk of online connections and how hate can adapt to new digital platforms. It centers on 26-year-old Demetris Nelson, who was accused of using the dating app Grindr to target 2 gay men in Detroit. Prosecutors allege that he sought them out precisely because of who they were. The victims, 31-year-old Brian Anderson and 26-year-old Malcolm Drake, believed they were meeting a new friend on July 6, 2019. Instead, the encounter turned violent when Nelson allegedly attempted to rob them, pulling out a gun during the meeting. Anderson was fatally shot, and Drake, though critically injured, managed to survive after being rushed to the hospital. Detectives quickly pieced the sequence together through technology. It was digital forensics that broke the case open, with investigators examining both victims' phones and recovering message threads, time-stamped logs, and GPS data that placed Nelson at the scene. The Grindr chat trail showed Nelson's alias and the final exchanges before the shooting. He was located through cell tower triangulation and arrested within 48 hours. Nelson faced charges including first-degree murder, felony murder, and assault with intent to murder. The case was assigned to the Fair Michigan Justice Project, an indication that authorities viewed the shooting as a potential hate crime targeting Detroit's LGBTQ community. The Wayne County prosecutor stated that Nelson used social media contacts to target, contact, rob, and fatally shoot one gay man and seriously wound another. This tragedy sent a ripple through the community, underscoring the severe danger faced when vulnerability meets malice on digital platforms. Case number 9 is that of Azurity, France. This is one of the most tragic cases, rooted in profound parental neglect and a final shocking act of concealment. It centers on Detroit mother Azurity, France, and her 3-year-old son, Chase Allen, who was blind and had a documented history of severe neglect. The timeline of abuse stretched back years. As early as 2018, Child Protective Services, CPS, recorded alarming conditions in France's home, including rat infestation, malnourished children, and visible injuries. The children were removed, but later returned in 2020. Within months, new injuries began to appear: burns, black eyes, bruised ribs, and signs of chronic malnourishment. France repeatedly admitted to lying to CPS and excessively striking Chase. Prosecutors believe Chase died in March 2022 from blunt force head trauma. France later admitted to investigators that she kicked him in the chest out of frustration because he would not eat. When she found him unresponsive the next morning, she chose not to call 911 out of fear her other children would be taken away. Instead, France placed Chase's body in a bag, directed her 9-year-old child to retrieve it, and stored it inside an inoperable basement freezer. She then lied to neighbors, claiming Chase had gone to Alabama. The truth was uncovered in June 2022 during a welfare check. Detroit Police Chief James White said something about France's demeanor led officers to follow their intuition and search the home, where they found the freezer. The remaining 4 children were immediately placed under state care. The investigation uncovered a staggering number of missed warnings. At least 6 CPS investigations, 7 rejected complaints, and over a dozen unverified family reports. France eventually pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and concealing a death, receiving a sentence of 35 to 60 years. Her sister, Azu Sauls, confronted her in court, saying, "You were supposed to protect Chase. Instead, you hurt him to the point where he can't come back." This case stands as a devastating indictment of both a mother and the system that repeatedly failed to save her child. Case number 10 is that of Devin Kareem Robinson. This final case is a tragic reminder of targeted hate violence within a social setting. It centers on 19-year-old Devin Kareem Robinson, who appeared in Detroit's LGBTQ+ nightlife scene after meeting one of the victims, Paris Cameron, at a gas station. Witnesses said Paris Cameron, along with her friends, invited him back to a nearby house party attended by about 15 people. Surveillance footage captured Robinson pacing near Paris before joining the group. Once inside, he engaged in sexual encounters with multiple partygoers. One witness later recalled that he walked out looking blank, a detail investigators emphasized. Around 4 a.m., surveillance captured Robinson buying juice at a gas station, and minutes later, a figure dressed in black, approaching from the direction of Robinson's residence, was captured on a neighbor's camera. Special prosecutor Jaime Powell Horowitz alleged Robinson had returned home, changed clothing, and covered his face before heading back toward the party house. Minutes later, a door was kicked open and gunfire erupted across the living room. Alunte Davis, 21, Timothy Blanchard, 20, and Paris Cameron, 20, were all fatally shot. 2 others survived. Prosecutors stressed that no robbery was attempted. The motive stemmed entirely from the victim's sexual orientation and gender identity. Detectives relied heavily on neighborhood surveillance and witness accounts. Although the shooter's face was covered, witness Clifton Keyes suspected Robinson because of the killer's distinctive light brown eyes. Robinson was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder. The defense argued the prosecution's account was a fanciful theory, claiming insufficient evidence. However, in March 2020, a jury convicted Robinson of first-degree premeditated murder and related charges. In July 2020, he was sentenced to 3 life terms without parole, plus lengthy additional sentences. The killings, which occurred during Pride Month, sent deep shock through Detroit's LGBTQ+ community and served as a powerful reminder of the mortal danger faced by targeted individuals.
Okay, thank you. And what you just heard were some of the shots that were heard in August as 6 officers were shot during a dramatic standoff that lasted for hours.
They call it the Cradle of Liberty. Philadelphia. A city built on revolution, resilience, and stories that echo through every street, but behind the landmarks and the legacy lies a darker timeline most people never see. Because here, the line between ordinary life and unthinkable violence can snap in an instant. In this compilation, you'll hear glimpses of the moments that shook the city to its core. When a mother was stabbed inside her van at dawn, when a lover's body was found burning in the quiet green of Fairmount Park, when an innocent man was gunned down outside a prison gate, and when a missing woman's fate was uncovered inside her own couch. These are just fragments of what lies ahead. Stories of rage, betrayal, desperation, and secrets that refuse to stay buried. Each case peeling back another layer of the city's shadowed side. Welcome to Philadelphia, where every story begins with daylight, but not all of them end there. Hey there, and welcome to Murder Now. Before we dive into today's case, I want to hear from you. It helps me know where our true crime family is watching from. So drop a comment right now. Tell me your city and what the weather is like outside your window. Are you cozy inside? Is it snowing? Raining? Let me know. All right, ready? Let's go. Case number 1 is that of Maurice Hill, a man whose name became synonymous with one of the most chaotic and unnerving police standoffs Philadelphia had seen in years. This story begins not with a calculated plan or a predetermined act of violence, but with a single moment spiraling into hours of fear, confusion, and danger. A day when an entire neighborhood was trapped under the sound of gunfire, and the city collectively held its breath. Hill was no stranger to law enforcement. His record stretched back decades, a history woven with illegal firearms charges, narcotics, and repeated run-ins with the system. Yet, even with that past, nothing hinted at the scale of the confrontation that would unfold on a humid summer afternoon in 2019. It began with officers from the Narcotics Strike Force executing what should have been a routine warrant. They entered the row house expecting resistance, yes, but not the eruption that greeted them the moment they stepped inside. As they cleared the first rooms, gunfire exploded from deeper within the home. It was immediate, relentless, and frighteningly precise. Officers scrambled for cover as bullets tore through drywall and shattered glass. In moments, the house transformed into a battleground, a confined, unforgiving space where every wall hid uncertainty and every doorway carried the danger of another shot. Several officers were trapped inside, pinned down by the barrage. Outside, neighbors fled or ducked for safety, the sounds echoing through the narrow streets like a warning no one had time to process. This wasn't just violence, it was a siege, one man holding an entire city at a standstill. Hill fired again and again, refusing every attempt at negotiation. 6 narcotics officers were wounded in the chaos, their injuries non-fatal, but severe enough to underscore just how close the situation came to becoming a tragedy of far greater magnitude. Meanwhile, SWAT teams mobilized. Armored vehicles sealed off the block, and tactical units worked feverishly to extract the officers still trapped inside. Hours passed with no sign of surrender. Instead, Hill dug in deeper, armed with an assault rifle and an unwavering determination to outlast the wall of law enforcement forming around him. By early evening, the scene had become a media storm, broadcast across the nation. Helicopters hovered overhead, sirens pulsed through the streets, and families waited anxiously for updates. For law enforcement, it became a test of strategy, patience, and caution. A single misstep could trigger more violence. A rushed entry could cost lives. While negotiators worked to establish some sliver of dialogue, Hill responded with more gunfire, pushing the standoff into the realm of the surreal. One man barricaded in a row home, managing to paralyze an entire neighborhood. But even the longest standoffs break eventually. After nearly 8 exhausting hours, something shifted. Voices carried, a pause held. And then, without warning, Maurice Hill stepped out. Surrounded by flashing lights and drawn weapons, he surrendered. The city exhaled, officers rushed to secure the building, and the wounded were taken for treatment. No one had died that day, and considering the hail of bullets unleashed, that fact alone felt nothing short of miraculous. The aftermath that followed was swift and unequivocal. In court, prosecutors laid out the severity of Hill's actions, the attempted murders, the reckless disregard for life, the war zone he created in a residential neighborhood. Testimony described trapped officers whispering updates over police radio, negotiators trying to calm a man who refused all reason, and the emotional toll on the community forced to watch their block turn into an armed encampment. Hill showed little remorse. The court responded with a sentence designed to ensure he would never return to the streets. 120 to 240 years in prison, effectively a lifetime behind bars. This case stands as a reminder of how quickly violence can engulf an entire community, how one individual's desperation and defiance can echo across a city. But while this story was defined by sustained gunfire and survival, the next case turns in a different direction, revealing how secrecy, denial, and hidden relationships can ignite a tragedy all their own. Case number 2 is that of Kylan Pratt, a young man who committed an unthinkable act to protect a secret he believed could destroy him. His life was split between the persona he showed the world and the hidden relationship he shared with Nazir Johnson, a relationship he cared about but was terrified to acknowledge publicly. That fear, over time, grew into a dangerous internal pressure that shaped every decision he made. Pratt lived constantly on edge, worried that rumors or suspicions would expose him. For Nazir, their connection was genuine and meaningful. But for Pratt, it became a symbol of vulnerability, something he felt he had to hide at any cost. Arguments began to surface, tension grew, and the emotional weight of the double life Pratt maintained slowly pushed him toward a breaking point. That breaking point came when fear overcame reason. During a private meeting, Pratt shot Nazir Johnson, killing the one person who knew the truth he could no longer control. The violence did not end there. Driven by panic, he transported Nazir's body to Fairmount Park, doused it with accelerant, and set it ablaze in a desperate attempt to erase the evidence of their relationship and the crime itself. But instead of eliminating the truth, the burning body drew immediate attention from investigators. Detectives quickly recognized the fire as an unmistakable attempt at concealment. Tracing Nazir's last interactions led them directly to Pratt, whose inconsistent statements and digital footprints began to unravel the false narrative he attempted to build. As investigators pieced together the timeline, the motive became starkly clear. Pratt was willing to kill to keep his relationship with Nazir hidden. In court, prosecutors emphasized the deliberate nature of the crime, the shooting, the transport of the body, and the attempt to destroy all traces of the victim's identity. They portrayed Pratt's actions as a calculated decision driven by fear and internalized conflict, not a sudden outburst. The emotional toll on Nazir's family was profound as they mourned a young man taken by someone who claimed to care for him. The judge imposed a life sentence reflecting both the brutality of the act and the irreplaceable loss inflicted. Pratt's attempt to bury the truth ended with the destruction of two lives, Nazir's, whose future was stolen, and his own, which would now be lived behind bars. And where this case was rooted in secrecy and hidden identity, the next turns to a different kind of darkness, a crime concealed not by fire, but by being tucked away inside the most unexpected place imaginable. Case number 3 is that of Gurley Sanchez Reyes, a case defined not by a sudden explosion of violence, but by calculated concealment and a disturbing attempt to disappear after the act. This story unfolds inside a workplace where two co-workers, Reyes and Ulises Martinez, carried underlying tensions that few around them recognized. What began as ordinary disagreements slowly escalated into a dangerous personal conflict far more intense than anyone could have imagined. Reyes and Martinez worked together long enough for friction to build. Colleagues later described moments of strain between the two women, subtle signs that their relationship had soured. Yet nothing suggested the situation would ever turn deadly. That changed abruptly when Reyes, fueled by anger or resentment still not fully understood, confronted Martinez in a private setting. The encounter spiraled into violence, and Reyes attacked with startling ferocity, stabbing Martinez multiple times. The brutality of the assault made it clear the act was not impulsive, it was personal. But the most chilling part came after the killing. Instead of alerting authorities or attempting to explain what happened, Reyes moved quickly to hide the crime. She stuffed Martinez's body inside a futon, wedging it deep within the frame as though the concealment might buy her time. Days passed quietly, the body undiscovered, while Reyes stayed silent, a calm facade masking the reality of what had occurred. The discovery happened only when the odor and the unusual weight of the futon drew attention. When investigators opened it, they found Martinez's body in a state that left no doubt of foul play. The shock of the concealment intensified the urgency of the investigation. Detectives quickly identified Reyes as the last person with Martinez, and the evidence left behind made it clear she had fled. Her escape took her far beyond city limits. By the time authorities pieced together the timeline and issued alerts, Reyes had already left the country. But international fugitives rarely stay hidden for long. Through cooperative efforts with foreign law enforcement, she was located and arrested in Madrid, bringing an abrupt end to her attempt to vanish. With her capture, the narrative crystallized. A workplace conflict turned lethal, a body hidden in a piece of furniture, and a suspect who tried to outrun responsibility across borders. The case stands as a reminder of how violence can erupt in the most familiar environments and how concealment only deepens the tragedy. And while this case was defined by a desperate attempt to hide a crime, the next unfolds in a moment of heated conflict, where an argument in a hallway turned into a fatal decision witnessed within seconds. Case number 4 is that of Samaya Williams, a case born not from long-planned malice, but from a volatile domestic situation that erupted in a moment of emotional chaos. This is a story set on New Year's Eve, a night when most people look forward to renewal, celebration, and possibility. But inside one Philadelphia apartment building, tension had reached a breaking point long before midnight arrived. The conflict centered around Williams, her mother, and her mother's fiancé, Adrian Reeves. Police had already been called earlier in the evening for a domestic disturbance. Officers spoke to the parties involved, assessed the scene, and ultimately left once things seemed to have calmed down. But what looked settled on the surface was anything but stable underneath. Resentments lingered, emotions simmered, and by the time the police exited the building, a fragile peace was all that remained, one that would not hold for long. Minutes later, another confrontation began in the lobby. Witness accounts describe raised voices, accusations, and the rapid escalation of a long-standing family conflict. Williams, who had already been emotionally charged from the earlier incident, found herself caught once again in the heated exchange. In that moment, reason dissolved. Williams pulled a firearm and shot Reeves in the lobby, an act that unfolded in seconds but carried consequences that would reverberate for years. The shooting sent residents scrambling and triggered immediate emergency calls. First responders rushed back to the same building they had visited only moments before, now finding Reeves critically injured. He did not survive. Williams, who had not fled the scene, was taken into custody, her emotions shifting between shock and devastation as the reality of what transpired settled around her. The investigation was swift given the clear circumstances, witnesses present, surveillance cameras in the lobby, and the history of the earlier domestic dispute. Prosecutors built a narrative centered on the escalating conflict, emphasizing how the volatility of the relationship, combined with the emotional state Williams was in, contributed to the fatal outcome. But while context explained the buildup, it did not excuse the decision to use deadly force. In court, Williams faced the full impact of her actions. The prosecution focused on the rapid escalation and the choice to resort to violence, while the defense highlighted the tense environment and the emotional turmoil leading up to the incident. Ultimately, the case became a tragic example of how domestic disputes can turn lethal within seconds, especially when weapons enter the equation. Reeves's death left a void in the family, and Williams's life, once filled with possibilities, became defined by a single irreversible moment. It was a reminder that domestic tension, when left unresolved, can collapse into irreversible tragedy. And while this case was fueled by raw emotion and split-second decisions, the next one unfolds in an entirely different way. A relationship shadowed by intimacy, trust, and a betrayal that ended in the murder of a well-known Philadelphia journalist. Case number 6 is the story of Gianna Tan Webb, a tragedy where youthful arrogance and reckless decision-making collided on a dark highway, shattering 3 families in an instant. This case is not defined by a fractured relationship, but by profound negligence, a choice to prioritize a thrill over the sanctity of human life, turning a routine patrol into a nightmare. Webb, just 21 years old, was navigating the night with a dangerous confidence. In a twist of cruel irony, she had been stopped for speeding just minutes earlier by the very troopers she would soon kill. They had released her only because they received a priority call to assist a pedestrian walking dangerously on the interstate. Webb's mindset was visible to the world. On social media, she had boasted about her ability to drive intoxicated, a chilling digital footprint of the ego that fueled the night's events. Then came the impact. Just after midnight on I-95, troopers Martin Mack III and Brandon Siska were on the shoulder, guiding pedestrian Reyes Rivera Oliveras to safety. The scene was controlled until Webb's SUV, traveling at over 100 mph, tore through the darkness. The collision was catastrophic. In a split second, the massive force of the impact claimed all 3 men, throwing them into the opposing lanes and reducing the vehicle to mangled steel. The legal fallout was immediate and severe. Investigations revealed Webb's blood alcohol level was nearly 3 times the legal limit. Standing before a grieving courtroom, the defense could offer little against the weight of her actions. Webb pleaded guilty to third-degree murder and homicide by vehicle, receiving a sentence of 27.5 to 60 years in prison. The loss rippled through the state. 2 dedicated officers and a civilian were gone, leaving a void in the community and serving as a stark reminder of the lethal power of a vehicle weaponized by alcohol. And while this tragedy unfolded amidst the chaos of a public interstate, the next case retreats into the claustrophobic silence of a parked van, where a mother's attempt to escape a toxic relationship ended in a brutal betrayal. Case number 7 focuses on Raymond Thompson, a harrowing example of how domestic toxicity can render even legal protections powerless. This case is defined by possessiveness, a refusal to let go that transformed a longtime partnership into a brutal execution, leaving a devastating void in the lives of 6 children. The victim, Ashley Lockhart, was a dedicated mother who had recognized the danger she was in. She had taken the correct legal steps, securing a protection from abuse order against Thompson, her fiancé, in an attempt to shield herself and her family from his escalating instability. Yet, the psychological tether of domestic abuse is strong. Despite the court order, the 2 met inside Lockhart's Honda Odyssey in West Philadelphia, a decision likely driven by Thompson's manipulation or a final attempt by Lockhart to negotiate peace. The interior of the van, typically a space of family routine, became a scene of unimaginable violence. Thompson, unable to accept the end of his control, attacked Lockhart with a knife. The assault was frantic and personal. He stabbed her multiple times in the face and arms, extinguishing her life in the very vehicle she used to transport her children. When police arrived, the scene was quiet but gruesome. Thompson was eventually apprehended, facing murder charges for an act that the district attorney described as incredibly tragic. The community was left reeling, not just from the violence, but from the heartbreaking reality of 6 children suddenly left without their mother due to a father figure's rage. Thompson's actions underscored the terrifying reality that a piece of paper often cannot stop a determined abuser. His arrest brought legal closure, but no solace for the shattered family unit left behind. And where this case involved a singular act of rage by an ex-partner, the next one reveals a colder, more calculated cruelty, where a man murdered his pregnant girlfriend and then enlisted the help of another woman to burn the evidence and hide the truth. Case number 8 uncovers the disturbing pact between Justin Smith and Talia Garnett, a story defined by cold calculation and a conspiracy to erase a human life. This case explores the darkest depths of betrayal, where a partner turns into an executioner and an accomplice steps in to help bury the truth. The victim, Diana Bryce, was 4 months pregnant, carrying the hope of a new future. However, her relationship with Smith had turned lethal. Instead of preparing for fatherhood, Smith allegedly viewed Bryce and their unborn child as liabilities to be eliminated. But the horror of this case lies not just in the murder, but in the lack of remorse that followed. Smith did not act alone in the aftermath. He enlisted the help of Talia Garnett, a woman willing to cross moral lines to aid a killer. The cover-up was systematic. After ending Bryce's life, the pair worked to destroy the evidence. They transported her body to a wooded area in southwest Philadelphia, discarding her like refuse. To complete the erasure, they drove Smith's car, the likely crime scene, to a secluded spot and set it ablaze, hoping the flames would consume the forensic traces of the violence. Police eventually unraveled the plot. Garnett was arrested and charged with arson, abuse of a corpse, and tampering with evidence for her role in the grisly cleanup. However, justice remains agonizingly incomplete. Justin Smith fled immediately, becoming a fugitive. He remains at large, leaving Bryce's family without closure, and the city haunted by the knowledge that a man capable of murdering his pregnant girlfriend is still out there. And while Smith runs to avoid answering for a domestic crime, the next case features a young man who ran from the prison walls themselves, a teenage serial killer whose spree of violence terrorized the city long before his escape made national headlines.